This is a 70-unit multifamily apartment building. Seller is looking for $10 million for this 70-unit apartment building. 10 million bucks. I put 10.5 because obviously we want to be paid a commission. We don't do anything for free. So you want to make sure you're always paying attention. Like, hey, if the seller goes, hey, I want to net 10 million bucks, you want to make sure you add some money for yourself. This is going to be seller financing. So that's why due diligence and closing costs are quite low. If this was not seller financing, if this was just a straight deal, I'm getting a mortgage, my closing costs would probably be at least $150,000. Okay, my due diligence and civil, it's probably pretty close to 50 grand, 70 units. Again, if I want to do a full-blown inspection, my inspection on a 70-unit apartment building might be $15,000, and that's just the inspection. My legal cost, right, will cost probably $15,000, right? An attorney fee will be $10,000 to $15,000 on this deal at least. And then any other, types of inspections or anything else you're going to get done, documentation, recording fees or anything like that. Yeah, I'm easily going to be at 50 grand. Okay. And then this is just for my loan. This is just fees for my loan. I'm going to be paying at least, somewhere around 1.5%, maybe 2%, maybe 3% on fees, on my loan. Obviously you want to speak to a bank to make sure you're allocating correctly, but in this case, we're doing seller financing, which is why there's going to be very minimal cost for that. Okay. I negotiated with the seller. They're going to agree to $7 million. They actually wanted 30% down, right? So this is a $10 million deal. They want 30% down. So again, I have to be allocating specific numbers. I want to be paid $500,000. Okay. So that means I have to make sure that my loan to purchase is allocating the extra 500 grand I added to it. Okay. Because if I go, oh, the seller just wants 30% down and I'm charging $10.5 million, that means the numbers are not going to be equal, right? Because if you look at $10 million and you do 30% down, how much is that? 10 million bucks, 30% down.
It's 3 million.
3 million. All right, great. Just want to make sure everyone's following me along. Good, cool. Now, if I do 10.5 million, okay, anytime you do seller financing, the big mistake that people make is that they don't increase the down payment by the exact amount of the commission. They just do the same percentage. Oh, the seller says they want 3 million bucks down, so let's just do $3 million down. Or they said they still want 30%, so they just allocate 30%. But it's not 30% anymore, and it's not just 3 million bucks. Now it's $3.5 million flat. So I have to keep my loan the same as if it was 10 million and then just add the 500 grand, which is why I'm at 67 or 66.667%, which means that I'm getting a loan amount of about 7 million bucks. Seller agreed to about 5% interest over a 30-year term. I'm negotiating 30-year at interest-only payments. The beautiful thing is that obviously we're looking at a very healthy debt service coverage ratio, which means we are cash flowing nicely. We like that, right? So one thing I'll do down here, yeah, why not? I'll do it here. Hold on a sec. Let's do this. Copy. Let's do a paste right here. We're going to do purchase cash on cash. Okay, ready for this? So this number, right, this cash on cash return is going to be equal to, let's see what our cash on cash return is. We're going to go to the cash flow statement, click on cash flow. There we go. And we're going to highlight operating cash flow after debt service. So we're going to highlight this total. So equals to the sum of all of that put together, right? So this total, we're just going to hit enter because I'm waiting for equals, I guess, the sum. Sorry, the sum. Okay, great. So now I'm just doing one step at a time, right? So first off, this is going to be my total cash collected. But now cash on cash return, right? So I would collect this much in my first year, but I need to do a percentage, okay? So now the percentage ratio, this is saying how much money am I going to make in my first year in correlation. Cash on cash is how much money out of pocket versus how much money did I return in the first year. So cash on cash is I'm going to return $164,000 in my first year, but that's into what number? This number, right? The amount of money out of pocket. So this is saying my down payment is going to be my closing cost, the 100,000 plus my 3.5 million, we're very close to it. Plus I'm adding $250,000 for renovations. Okay. I'm going to make some renovations. I'm going to clean up some apartments, right? I'm allocating 250 grand for that. So I'm going to divide it into the 3.849 million or call it 3.85. We're going to hit that. And then we're going to turn this into a percentage. So I'm making 4.26% in my first year. So this is year one cash flow. Okay. Year one cash on cash returns is 4.26%. Not great. Okay. It's not spectacular. This is just one of the many variables, one of the many metrics that I'm looking at to see how good my deal is. We talk about IRR all the time. So this is obviously for my investor. My investor is going to get a return of 21% or just about. The total deal is 25.7, which means I'm going to be making obviously a piece of that. And this is giving my assumption saying that I'm going to sell this deal. I'm going to sell it, okay, at the end of 12 quarters. Okay, so when we do this spreadsheet, everything we do is in quarters. So we're going to do it in 3 years. We're going to try to sell this deal at a 6% cap rate. After we have increased the value of this property, it's saying at a 6% cap rate, our implied value is going to be $13.75 or $773 million. So my building's going to be worth this much money. Okay, the property that I'm buying for 10.5 will be worth 13.773. And we're going to try to do this in 3 years, okay, which is trying to say that my cash on cash return overall, based on the amount of money I've invested and the amount of money that I am returning, okay, which is this figure here, I'm making 70% on my money. Now, if you take 70%, or if you calculate all these distributions, calculated into over a 3-year time horizon, you get 21% a year. So let's keep breaking this down, because obviously the only thing that this isn't the reason why you're not saying is because this is not calculating. I think actually, yeah, this is calculating all the cash flows. So let's go to the next page. So the one thing I want you to notice though about this deal and about New Jersey is that New Jersey is very heavily with rent control. It's got a lot of rent control. So it's very, very different than some of your states out there, right? You got Texas, which doesn't have any rent control. You got Florida, doesn't have any rent control. Lucky you. Okay, New Jersey, we have to be very careful with where we invest. So this one has rent control. So what we're doing here is that this is the current average rent per unit. You see there's 14 studios, 46 one bedrooms, 10 two bedrooms. This here is broken down into what it is currently. Then what you're having over here is the future value, my pro forma. Now what I'm saying here is very, very important. You have to be very careful because this here is saying that I'm going to be able to churn all of my units without a problem. Okay, this is my hyper-aggressive version of my model. This is saying, I know there's rent control, but I'm going to have no problem raising the rents, which is, by the way, very tough to say is actually accurate. Okay, I'm going to try to give, because I want to give you a pro and con of this type of stuff, because every single time I speak to a real estate agent, they're like, oh yeah, every single year, you guys look at pro forma, every single year for the next 10 years, rent's going to go up. And every single year for the next 10 years, expenses are going to stay pretty flat. That doesn't make any sense. Both are going to have, kind of dips and, like right now, rents are not going up. Rents are flat. Rents actually have gone backwards in some instances. It's something to just think about, right? Like rents don't just infinitely go up into the sunset, okay? So like right now, I'm calculating on this pro forma, which is why I'm saying you have to look back at your numbers quite a few times and make sure like, hey, is this actually accurate? Is this the most likely scenario? And again, I asked for a rent roll. That's how I came up with these numbers, okay? So this is saying every year it's going to go up 3% a year. Why don't we even just say 2%? Okay, we're going to be very conservative, saying that I can get 2% bumps per year. What if I only did here? I only went to $1,200. Actually, we're going to go a little higher. We're going to go $1,300. Let's just say for this one, we're going to say $1,400. And for this one, I'm only going to say $1,650. Okay, this is just a little bit more conservative. At the bottom, you can see I'm doing a 5%. I don't know why this says 2% here, but that's inaccurate. So you're going to see here, this is my vacancy rate. Okay, 5% vacancy rate. So that'll discount everything. And it's saying that I'm grossing $970,000 per year, including my 5% vacancy rate, which by the way, on this deal right now, they have 10 units of the 70 that are delinquent. 10 of these units are delinquent. So my vacancy rate actually might even be a little low. I might even have to do like 8% to start, which obviously affects the deal. Okay, let's go to expenses a little bit. Let's just check out the expenses. By the way, all these expenses were given to me by the seller. Okay, they were all broken down by the seller. So these are not really assumptions. This is actually what the seller's paying out. When you look at this, guys, who wants to come off mute and tell me some things that really stand out to you of these numbers here?
Property taxes look really high.
Property taxes look really high. Awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. I agree 100%. I think property taxes look incredibly high. What else?
I think marketing is pretty variable from owner to owner, right? In terms of how you're...
For sure. I mean, the challenge is like you look at marketing and what marketing is to me is not only the money I spend on actually advertising the property, but paying in commissions per year.
Reserves might be a little low.
Reserves might be a little low. Okay, by the way, this reserve number, I believe we auto-calculated that off of a certain amount of money per unit. So actually, the one I was looking at was utilities. Look at the utility costs per year, right? I'm paying 115 grand in utilities a year, okay? Which, by the way, that's broken down into two things. So the tenants only pay their own electric bills, okay? They only pay their own electric. So that means that is water, sewer, right? Water, sewer, and that is gas, right? Or heat. Let's just call it heat. Okay, because right now I believe it's an oil tank, if I remember correctly. I'm paying 115 grand in water, sewer, and heating, just in those two. So what's interesting is like,
What are they-
okay,
Do they have a pool? Because I hope they have a pool for that amount of money.
no, they do not have a pool. No pools. Jersey's not a big pool area, right? There's not a lot of pools for garden apartments, especially with this building here. What's interesting though is like, okay, number one with property taxes. Okay, let's just start here. Number one is property tax. And what's also interesting about it is that Roselle and New Jersey in general does this, where they do spot assessments. I know it's like in some areas everyone argues that they don't do spot assessments. New Jersey does spot assessments, which basically just means it will reassess upon sale. So all of a sudden, if the property was purchased, let's just say for $4 million 6 years ago, and that property, you know, for whatever reason, right? They renovated it. They spent $1 million on renovations. Okay, so they're in it for $5 million, and now they want to sell it for 10. Well, if the taxes right now are 150 some odd grand because it's based off of a $5 million assessment, when I pay 10, it's going to go to $300,000, which is obviously going to kill this deal. It's going to make it a very large issue. So one thing we will have to do is do an LLC buyout, which is not super easy, but it will help us mitigate that issue. And obviously, if I'm looking at this deal with another investor and I'm like, hey, like this deal, let's just say this deal made a lot of sense, but the one thing we're worried about is taxes on the reassessment. An LLC buyout can be very, very, very lucrative. Okay. LLC buyouts, where essentially we create a LLC if the property's not in an LLC. We create an LLC for that property to be in, and then we just buy out the LLC for like $1. We buy it for $1. And what happens is that property now gets, like, it doesn't get noticed or recognized as a property sale, just because I'm just transferring the LLC essentially. Or the property the property trades for $1. You allocate $1 to be transferred for the property, right? That's what the property transfer is. But the LLC is being bought for $10.5 million. That's why it typically helps with assessments. And by the way, I asked
Henry.
about it, and they actually had mentioned that the taxes had actually just been reassessed last year, and they went up $40,000. So that was not fun.
Henry, when you're talking about the buyout LLC, are you buying, you said you create a new LLC
If needed.
if needed. Okay. But you're buying theirs basically.
Correct.
Okay. Love it. Okay.
Yeah, so because sometimes the property's in an LLC, it's called, this property be, call it 123 Main Street LLC, right? And I can
Sure.
just buy out that LLC, and that's typically not an issue. But sometimes it's in the person's name, right? It's just in John Smith's name. I would have to create an LLC, or their attorney would have to create an LLC, and then I would just be buying that LLC. And obviously, there's a little bit of liability that you would be taking on. It's obviously better if you create a new LLC, because that way you can almost guarantee that there's no lawsuits or pending issues against that LLC, because there is some.
And are you creating that LLC under their name and then putting it into yours, or you just, if it's a new one, you just do it under yours?
No, so remember, they have to be the one who owns it.
Exactly. Okay. Yep.
They have to own it, and then I would be purchasing it from them.
Love it.
So I look at it like this. Most of the time for larger commercial properties, the property's in an LLC, especially relatively new purchases. Everything has to be in an LLC. They just don't let you buy it in your name anymore, right? It's just not a normal thing anymore. It used to be very normal, where you just bought
Well, and
it.
especially with loans and everything. I mean, you're not
That's
going
what
to
I'm
do.
saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not normal anymore for people to be buying properties in their actual name. So a lot of properties these days, the vast majority, if not all of them, are bought in LLCs. However, keep in mind, when I'm acquiring an LLC, let's say that this LLC has been active for 20 years, 123 Main Street LLC. Let's say it only owns this one property, which again would be favorable, but you don't know if there's any pending lawsuits on this LLC. You don't know if there's any issues that have come across with this specific LLC. Maybe that LLC, they claim bankruptcy through this LLC. You have no idea.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? Which is why sometimes it can be more lucrative if you started a new LLC. But again, the seller has to agree, and it's not just like there is tax liability that they incur by doing so. They have to talk to their own accountant. Obviously depends on their income and all that jazz. Okay?
Love it. Thanks,
But
Henry.
it does help you with property taxes. So that's number one. Number two, let's talk about utilities, because again, this is rent controlled. So it's not like I could just all of a sudden start drastically changing the rents. So with the utilities, number one, water, sewer. Sure, I can start charging people back their water sewer bill. Like, one thing that they do in Florida, very, very common, is that they break down all the utilities and they charge back the tenants. Okay. It's a lot of management. It's very management intensive. Okay. Very, very management intensive. Essentially what we'll try to do is that we'll just try to lump sum average, right? So what we can do is we take the 115. Let's just do the number over here. So you go equals this number divided by 12. No. Oh my goodness gracious. What was that? Divide by 12. And then, so that's a dollar amount. Okay. So you have this amount. So let's just say, this is heating and water. So I'm just going to split these two. Let's just do equals, that divided by 2. let's just say it's even. It's not going to be even. Okay. I'm giving you round numbers. So that means let's just say for heating and for, let me just do the same thing here. Equals. Great. So I have one for water, one for one water sewer, and one for heating. I'm just making assumptions, guys. This is not exactly accurate, but giving you some food for thought. What you can do, and you'll obviously have to make this is just part of management, is that you will try to charge this back in some fashion. So if there's 70 units, right? So what I'll do is I'll take this number, 1 second, and then I will divide it by 70 units. So that means every single unit I should be charging back both of these fees. So $70, or I would say $75 a month, right? $75 a month for water and $75 a month for heating or heat, heat AC or whatever, right? So I'll charge them that, okay, depending on, how it looks here. But I will charge back the tenants $75 a month for, for each of the utilities that they are responsible for. So now now the base rent might be $1,200, which by the way, I can increase by CPI, which let's just say is 4%. So now I can go to $1,260 in $1,260 per month in rent. Okay, so that's 4% increases because I'm again rent controlled. So I can only go up by 4%. But then I can add in an additional $150 in fees. Okay, I can add $150 in. Again, you have to talk to your. Sometimes it depends, but I know some townships are okay with us charging utility costs, but the rent itself can't change by more than 4%. Okay, so this is just some ways that we get around this. So we charge $75 for water or $75 for heating, and then we could charge things like $25 for trash, and we could charge like $25 for parking. And all of a sudden now we got somebody up, the $60 for the CPI raise, right? The 4% per year, but then you also got them up $200 in fees. Now all of a sudden in 1 year you got somebody up $260, which is 20% increases in rent. Now obviously you can't just do that every year, but now what happens is every single year now you can start charging people an extra $5 per fee. So now it's like, okay, well, next year I can now charge $80 for water sewer. I can charge $80 for gas and heat. I can charge $30 for trash. I can charge $30 for parking for all the new tenants or for renewals or anything you like. So you see how you can kind of make these numbers move, but this is why it's important to look through my numbers. Where can I make money up here? Because now if I start doing the math here, I'm like, oh, okay, wait a second. What if I could have a line item on the income statement here? Okay, I go to income and this is utility reimbursements, and then I'm going to have 70, and let's just say right now it's 0, but I'm going to try to get it to at least $75 per unit on average within 4 quarters. So I'm going to start averaging, I'm going to start trying to raise the amount of money I get for all the units, right? And I'm going to slowly start building that up, right? Where I'm within the first year, I'm going to hopefully try to, increase this over time, where now I'm going to start adding up, and start making some serious money just from these fees. But this and then eventually I can, start playing around with some of the numbers. So let's go back to our summary page. Because this is what it gives you guys. This is why it's important to play around with some numbers, because a lot of people will say oh, this is such a fantastic deal. Why is nobody biting on it? Well, my internal rate of return is -4.5. So this is the wild thing that occurs when you start playing with your numbers and actually see what's actually accurate. Okay. So if I go back to income, just by playing with the vacancy rate of now, if I go down to 5%, and let's just see what that did to my summary. Just that 3%, look at that, guys. A 3% difference in vacancy rate adjustment changed it from a -4% IRR to a 10.5% IRR. So it made us go from losing money to being positive. Just that 1% of vacancy, which by the way is important to pay attention to. You're never going to be at 100% occupancy. What else can we adjust, right? And that was also including the fact that we adjusted these numbers. We went down a little bit. So now let's just say, okay, well, what if we can get our rents up even more so? Let's say we can say $14.75 and $13.50. I'm up another 5%. Okay, this is what you actually want to see. What's actually what's realistic. You don't want to be super optimistic here. I can go super optimistic and then super pessimistic and then fall in somewhere in the line. That's sort of what I end up doing. Okay, it's okay, if I'm super optimistic, where am I at? If I'm super pessimistic, where am I at? And if I give a relatively accurate assumption based on true factual data of what is the most likely scenario, this deal doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense here, right? It's maybe a 15% return. It's not horrible, especially if, guys, this is a cap rate of a 6% sale. If I go to 6.5%, it'll slowly start changing, right? If I go to 7%, I'm down to 4.5, right? If I go to if I can't sell it for if I can only sell it for a 7.5 cap, I'm selling it for less money than what I bought it for.